Hello everyone and welcome to another session of AP Human Geography with Mr. Elrod. Today we're going to continue on with Unit 5, Agriculture and Rural Land Use. Actually, this will be our last installment for this particular unit. We're going to carry on from our previous conversation, which was on some of the current issues that we deal with in agriculture, whether it be issues with man and their use of the land or food distribution. Today we're going to be talking specifically about some of the environmental issues that we're running into as we deal with really a couple things. One of our main issues in the world today is going to certainly be an expanding population in our world. Obviously, as there are more people in our world, there's more people to feed. And if there's more people to feed, then there's more food. We have to grow more food. I mean, that's just the way it goes. If people are born, we like for them to survive, as far as I can tell. And so, in order for them to survive, we have to be able to feed them. And so a lot of these problems stem from that particular situation, that particular circumstance. And as you learned in the second unit, the population unit, one of the areas in the world, or the areas in the world where we have most of our population growth, is in less developed countries, and that's one of the main issues, is that people in that part of the world, in terms of their methods of agricultural production, are not always the most efficient and the most effective either, and so that can create environmental harm. Not only that, the world is becoming wealthier, which of course is something that's certainly good. We like it that people are becoming wealthier and they can afford a better standard of living and those types of things. But as that becomes the case, they begin to consume more, and they consume more luxury goods and luxury crops and those types of things. And so uh, as that happens, there's an even greater desire and drive for making profits, and so more land has to be brought under cultivation. The land is used more intensely, and so that ends up developing some of our modern environmental issues that we're running into. Now, of course, we have developed methods to try and improve the environmental condition to make some agricultural practices not as detrimental to the environment, but still there are some issues that we have to deal with as we move forward. Clearly, one of the issues that we have to address kind of initially is the issue of soil and loss of soil or soil productivity, because we need soil in order to grow plants. Now, of course, earlier in the unit we saw the use of hydroponics. We saw this vertical gardening that's taking place, and so maybe some of those situations are starting to alleviate themselves. But even still, if we destroy the soil to the point where it can't be used anymore and no vegetation can grow on it, then of course that is going to be harmful, not just to the plant life and vegetation, but also to the animals that are around and the immediate ecosystem. Anyway, so some problems that we're running into, of course, like I was mentioning earlier, as populations grow, there's going to be more intense farming, typically for profit, because people are looking to make more money, become part of the global economy. And so with that, you're going to have a more intense use of the soil. And so with the more intense use of the soil doesn't have as much time to rejuvenate itself, and eventually could become barren. With that, you potentially could cause even greater soil erosion. And so when we have soil erosion is when we lose our layer of topsoil, our top layer of soil, our topsoil can be said either way. And so when we lose that topsoil, that's our most nutrient-rich layer of soil, and so it becomes much more difficult for any type of vegetation to grow back when we've lost that topsoil. And then we have additional issues when it comes to soil erosion into our streams, into our rivers and things like that. And of course, that's going to impact the ecosystems in the rivers and the water ecosystems. So that's going to potentially create even greater difficulties and issues there. And in the drier places in the world, you have the potential issue of desertification. And so with that desertification is simply the expansion of the desert. And so desert regions, where you have land that's intensely used, the potential for the desert to continue to expand. Of course, the desert, it's very difficult, next to impossible, to sustain large populations, to grow much of anything, for anything really of life to be living there. And so with that, of course, if the desert continues to expand, then that essentially is going to negate that area as a place of agricultural productivity, and so of course those could those that will create problems as we move forward. Deforestation, and of course we've been, you've been talking about this since you were a young child in elementary school. The problems with deforestation, the need for trees in terms of the air quality and air purity on the planet, and not only that, trees as a natural resource, but it's very similar as we move forward. Areas that are heavily forested, especially in less developed countries, in order for those less developed countries to become a part of the global economy, they're starting to clear some of their forests. Now, their forests are being cleared for a variety of different reasons. You might have those who are living in regions, tropical regions, who practice shifting cultivation, who have to use their land more intensely. Maybe their population has grown. They're having to clear the land more often. And so they potentially have ruined the soil in that region. Maybe people are clearing the land for the harvesting of the trees themselves for timber. Also, in some regions, especially in South America, you're seeing forests being cleared for ranching, for cattle ranching and plantation. Again, and that's all in an effort to become a part of the global economy. So as they're trying to improve their quality of living, in order for them to make more money, they are causing some environmental issues. And again, a lot of that's driven by the global demand of the market. And some might point and say that, well, either the plantations or the ranches might be owned by those that are in more developed countries, so you have the transnational corporations, and so they could be blamed. Either way, it still stands that you have, in some of the less developed countries, people who are trying to improve their situation in life, trying to become a part of the global economy. And so as a result of that, they have taken to clearing out parts of these large forests for that particular reason. And obviously, as we move forward and we're talking about agricultural practices, you can't forget about the use of water. Clearly, as agriculture expands, we're going to need to use more water in order to water the crops that we have, in order to water the animals that we're producing, those types of things. And so we know that especially clean water is not something that is always easy to come by, and especially in some parts of the world, or even some parts of the country, like in the United States, the western portion of the United States has been under a drought for an extended period of time. And as we tap into these reservoirs, and we have the aquifers that we're tapping into, and those begin to drop, and we run into periods of little rain, the idea of less water becomes kind of a greater and a greater issue, because not only do we, of course, need water to water the plants and grow them for populations, but of course we need water to drink so that we can survive. And again, everybody likes to survive, as far as I can tell. It's used for sanitation. We use it to wash our clothes. We use it for cooking. We use water for all kinds of things. And so with poor water management, and if we don't bring water management under good control, through wise use or wise practice, or anything along those lines, then obviously we potentially could run into a tremendous amount of trouble. Of course, with the development of new seeds and crop varieties, GMOs, scientists have been able to develop varieties of crops and plants that don't require as much water. But again, this is just something that we all need to be aware of in terms of natural resources that are needed for human survival, and just be mindful that we need to be considerate as we use them. Now, this is not a perfect example of water use, but it is a good example of what happens to natural features in the world because of poor management. This is the Aral Sea, and you can see, sorry for the pun, or the rhyme, or whatever you want to call that. You can see here the Aral Sea. This is 1960. And this is the year 2009. You can go look at some pretty interesting and drastic pictures of the Aral Sea on Google. You just type in Aral Sea, Aral Sea, SEA. You can see and some interesting time-lapse pictures. And this is a fantastic illustration of gross mismanagement of resources. So the Aral Sea, the reason that this happened is because the Soviets were trying to use Central Asia as their primary place of growing cotton, but over time their infrastructure became poorly maintained. You had issues with pipes that were cracking and leaking. You had people who were siphoning off water from the pipes and using it. And so, due to a whole host of reasons, I mean, you have this very large inland body of salt water that, for all intents and purposes, no longer exists. And of course, it's creating all kinds of issues in the region. You have salinization, or salt being thrown up into the air and scattered all over Central Asia. You have fishing industries that were destroyed, and so it is certainly something that we need to be aware of as we move forward into the future. So the question, of course, is what can we do? And so just one example of actions that's being taken is you have what's called Debt for Nature programs that are being established in order to try and preserve natural resources, predominantly in less developed countries. And so the idea here is that more developed countries are trying to take the initiative, and larger organizations are trying to take the initiative to help less developed countries keep them from overusing their natural resources. So the idea here is that governments and international organizations will forgive international debts of less developed countries if they are willing to preserve some of their natural habitats. And so instead of using those things more intensely to try and gain profit, to try and pay off some debts or some loans that maybe they had gotten from governments or organizations like the the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund, instead they could preserve those natural resources and maybe use them for something like ecotourism instead of bringing them under cultivation. Well, that's all that we have for this particular unit. Hope you found all that information to be helpful. Of course, if you need to, feel free to leave comments in the comment box below. And I look forward to seeing you in our next unit, which is Economic Geography and Development.